I'm Mariette DiCristina, and I'm the Dean of Boston University's College of Communication. I'm also an alum of COM and the parent of a recent BU grad. Welcome to today's very special COM Talks event, Black, Female, and Funny. Two women discuss writing comedy for TV. This event is co-sponsored with the college's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, and also its Film and Television Department. I'm grateful for everybody's help in putting it together today. Everyone knows how difficult it is for women and people of color to find a seat in the writer's room in Hollywood. So when you're a woman and a woman of color, getting a seat in that room is bound to be much harder. Today, we're going to hear from two award-winning and awesome writers who overcame the odds and obstacles to becoming working TV comedy writers. They'll talk about their journeys and share advice to up-and-coming writers. Maybe they'll even tell us about some of the funny things that happened along the way. This event is being recorded and will be available later on the COM website and also on our YouTube channel. When you have questions, please feel free to use the little Q&A box at the bottom of your screen instead of the chat function. Feel free to put your questions in at any point, and there'll be plenty of time to address them a little later during this discussion. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce our speakers and moderator for today. First, let's say hello to Rochelle R. Williams, who's co-executive producer of Love Life on HBO Max. Rochelle is a writer and general woman about town. She graduated from BU in 2007 with a BS in film and television. And while attending BU, Rochelle won the prestigious Flater Rosenberg short screenplay, I can't talk today, contest as a junior. And she was also the head writer of the BU TV soap opera, Bay State. Rochelle began writing comedy shortly after moving to Los Angeles. She created and co-starred in a web series called Pass, a show about the ups and downs of two Black female writers trying to make it in Hollywood. In October 2015, Rochelle was hired as a staff writer for season 3 of the critically acclaimed Star series called Survivor's Remorse, and she continued as a story editor for the show's 4th and final season. Rochelle, with her co-writer Lauren Hausman, won the 2017 Women's Image Network Award for Best Writing for her season 3 episode of Survivor's Remorse. Rochelle has also written for the Netflix animated series Tucka and Birdie and is currently co-executive producer on Love Life season 2 on HBO Max. Rochelle also wrote for season 3 of True TV's Tacoma FD as a supervising producer. Welcome, it's so great to have you, Rochelle.
Thank you, Mariette.
Now let's say hello to our second awesome speaker for today, Bernadette Luckett, a writer and producer. Bernadette began doing stand-up comedy over 20 years ago in New York City after working as a professional model, a cookie packer, and a lab tech at a BD clinic. She gave up her apartment, put all her possessions in storage, and worked the road for 2 years straight, performing at comedy clubs all over the US. She's appeared on stand-up shows on NBC, Comedy Central, A&E, and MTV. After moving to Los Angeles, she wrote her first sitcom spec script. It got her into the Warner Brothers Writers Workshop, after which she was hired as a staff writer on her first sitcom, Living Single. Bernadette has been a writer and producer on several TV sitcoms, including Sister Sister, Buddies with Dave Chappelle, The Tracy Morgan Show, Romeo, and Girlfriends. Bernadette appeared in and co-produced the award-winning documentary Comedy Warriors, Healing Through Humor, which won the prestigious Television Academy Honors Award and is aired on Showtime, PBS, Netflix, Amazon, and Hulu. Working on this project got her back into stand-up, which she is loving more than ever. So glad to have you here today with us, Bernadette.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Now I'd like to introduce our moderator, Bill Broaddus, who is Assistant Professor of Film and TV here at the College of Communication. After more than 1,000 stand-up comedy performances, and yes, Bill tells us he counted them, including several appearances on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno and Late Night with Conan O'Brien, Bill found himself in Los Angeles writing jokes for TV. Somehow that led him back to his hometown in Boston as a writer and voice talent for myriad award-winning animated sitcoms. Somewhere between performing, traveling, raising a family, watching the Red Sox, and teaching, Bill found time to write a screenplay that was optioned, a 1-hour drama pilot and a half-hour sitcom pilot, both of which ended up as quarterfinal finishers in premier TV pilot competitions. And wait, there's more. In 2018, his independent feature film, Sweeney Killing Sweeney, premiered. We're so delighted to have him with us here at COM. Welcome, Bill, and I now hand the virtual mic over to you.
Thank you very much, Dean Christina, and welcome to our guests. I'm so happy that you guys could do this with us because I didn't want to do this alone. And I definitely would have had to change the title if I had.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But it's really great. I want to start talking about, I got a lot of questions to ask, but I want this to be free flowing. Just go from one subject to another is fine. But let's kind of go back to that beginning and maybe start with Bernadette. So you told some interesting stories. So how did you end up getting into Hollywood? We could stop when you get to that part, but what led you to there?
Hollywood. Oh, gee. Well, I was working as a lab tech at a microbiology clinic, and the teacher was an alcoholic, so she wouldn't show up a lot of times. So I had to take over her classes. And so people were laughing when I was showing them how to use a microscope and that kind of stuff. So I thought, oh, maybe I should go for showbiz. So my friend and I decided to be models, and we paid $500 to an agency, and they made us walk around with books on our head and stuff. But they had us do improv, and that's where I saw I have kind of a knack for this. So I started doing stand-up comedy. I moved to New York, did stand-up comedy, went on the road for 2 years, did comedy for a long time, and then I went to LA, and everybody was writing on sitcoms. So I said, oh, I'll do that too. So I wrote what I thought was a Seinfeld spec and took it to get printed. And the guy goes, what is this, a play? And I go, no, it's a spec. He goes, oh, well, it's wrong format. And this is all, I didn't know anything. He knew more than I knew. So I rewrote it, got an agent, and agent submitted it to the Warner Brother workshop. I got in there and worked ever since.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Talk about a circuitous route.
Yeah,
to go from,
I know.
And I hope you thanked that alcoholic teacher for getting you on the right path. She's somewhere raising a toast to you right now.
Yes. Yeah.
Rochelle, what about yours? I mean, we know that you were here at BU. What brought you here? I forget, where are you from originally?
So I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, specifically Stone Mountain, Georgia. And actually, I kind of have a similar beginning to Bernadette just a little earlier. In 9th grade, our biology teacher quit. So I learned no science in 9th grade. So I kind of just started writing during class and like doing short stories, and I just got more interested in writing, and like got into movies really. I was always like 8th and 9th grade, I really became like a film nerd and just started watching everything. And my mom never censored anything. So like I saw like Goodfellas at 12, and I just like really got into movies and started trying to write a little bit. And then so like 2 movies that did it for me were American Beauty, and then this movie Go, written by Doug Lineman. And like I was 14, I'm like, oh, these are the best movies I've ever seen in my life. Like I think I want to be a screenwriter. And then of course I tried to write a screenplay. It had terrible formatting. It was like 56 pages from beginning to end. I somehow thought I had told a complete story. And but I thought it was really cool to just like be a writer. And science wasn't going to happen. That was just kind of like, because, you know, every kid's like, I'll be a doctor. And then that was crushed. And it was like, maybe writing's good. And I just kind of followed that. And yeah, and but I've always been like kind of OCD and over prepared. So like I was looking at all the colleges, all the film schools, got USC's application. It was totally overwhelming. They're like, send us a feature screenplay. I'm like, oh, I don't have that. So like, okay, USC's out. And luckily BU accepted me into COM. I didn't need all that stuff. I didn't have to have it all together yet. But yeah, I kind of just like had like kind of like tunnel vision when it came to like at least working in film and TV in some capacity, and applied to BU, and then did graduate from there, and then moved to LA a couple months after from Atlanta. And of course, then Atlanta had a huge boom, like starting in 07. Like there was all the production. I was just like, I kind of could have stayed home, but actually I love LA. I wouldn't change it.
Yeah. So it's interesting, Bernadette and Rochelle, you're talking about like when you first putting together that first script that you're not really sure what you're doing, which is, I think it's funny you say, Bernadette, about like the print guy in LA. It's like everybody in LA is in the business in some form or another. They want it, so that's great that they're able to say, hey, this is wrong. Do this format. I mean, I'm always stressing to students that matters. If you want to be in that matters. So once you get to LA, I don't know, at that point, you're kind of sure of what you want to do, perhaps. So did anything deter you at that point as far as being a woman and as far as being a person of color? Did you feel like, did you experience it, or did you anticipate it, or what's the story? I don't know. Can start, Rochelle?
Well, nothing. I was really stupid. Like I knew all this stuff existed, and like I knew a lot of Black women didn't write for TV, but I was always such a researcher. Like I tried to know who was like Black and had these jobs. I've always, watched the credits. But yeah, when I moved to LA, the goal was to be a screenwriter. And a couple years before that, I'd seen this movie, Something New, written by Chris Turner. And then I knew she wrote on Living Single, and I happened to just run into her in a like cafe in LA. And I was like, hey, like, I loved your movie. She didn't read any of my stuff. I didn't put any pressure on her, but I just asked her some advice about, writing screenplays. And she's like, it took me like 6 years to get this movie made. I think you should try TV. And I was like, okay. Even though I had stayed home for months writing screenplays, like I'd written like 2 features, and then I was like, okay, TV, I need to pivot. And so then I wrote an Entourage spec, which I stand by. I love that script. 07's a different time. And then I submitted it to the Cosby program, which is another relic of the past, definitely a now defunct program. But I got a few rounds in there, and the interviewer asked me if I'd taken TV classes, and I just come from BU, and it was like, I took screenwriting classes. It's the same. And then she asked me all these questions about TV formatting. I was like, oh, I don't know any of this. And she suggested I take a class, and I'm like, I'm not taking a class. But so yeah, then 8 years later, I got myself together and got a real staff job. But yeah, so just like I did kind of come out there with like, I guess more sometimes like I didn't really think about like the race element, but I was like, I think I came out like a little cocky and just like, TV will be easier than writing screenplays. And I kind of had to figure all that stuff out and figure out how to really get into sitcom mode and comedy mode versus screenwriting. So that was probably one of my first lessons.
Yeah. Okay, Bernadette, what about you? What about the anticipation of any kind of, everything you heard about getting a job in the business, and it's all established white men, the gang. How did you feel about that?
Well, I didn't know about any of that. Like I said, when I went to LA, a lot of my friends were writing on shows. I didn't think about color. I just thought about, oh, I could do that too. So it wasn't until I got into the business more so that I realized every Black writer had the same resume, because we were all getting shuttled to the same shows all the time. And that's when I kind of became aware more that there was some racial bias going on.
Yeah. Well, you had said about when we talked the other day about the, when Friends came along and you thought you'd love to write for that show.
Yeah, my agent gave me a copy of the pilot for Friends when it first was written, and I loved it. Especially the Phoebe character. I related to the wackiness of that character. I loved that show. So I said, get me an appointment with them. So they submitted my script, which it had got me jobs elsewhere, and they wouldn't meet with me. And I said, please push it. They pushed and tried, could not get a meeting just to meet them. So looking back on that, I hate to always project that something was racial, but possibly that was it. Possibly they just didn't like my script or whatever. But that's when I started realizing that things maybe wouldn't be as easy as I thought to be on shows that I liked. I mean, I was always a Seinfeld, Larry Sanders, kind of like the quirkier comedy. more so than what was offered at the time, which, you know, was all viable TV, like the Wayans brothers, Homeboys from Outer Space, that kind of thing. But it wasn't really my comedy area.
Yeah.
But those are the shows that I was being submitted for.
Yeah. Rochelle, did you
Yeah.
ever feel pigeonholed like that?
I mean, I still do, you know, but it's, yeah, because I remember when I used to have a writing partner, we wrote a 30 Rock together, and I stand by this spec too, like, and we just couldn't get a meeting. And that's, you know, it's different. Like Tina Fey definitely had her group of people, and just, you know, we were very green too. We barely had a manager, but it did feel like we needed to be in a certain lane for sure. And then when I started writing like solo, it was just like you just tried to have to like find that lane. And because I was actually babysitting at the time, so I was babysitting for my friend Bill Walker, who had had an Emmy for Frasier, Will and Grace, Roseanne. He'd done all these great shows, and he kind of retired from writing. He's like, hey, but once, like, if I ever get anything going again, I'm going to help you. I was like, okay, well, I'm not worried about that. And he got me my meeting on survivor's remorse because his daughter happened to go to school with one of Michael Malley's kids, you know, and it was just like, oh, wow, it was like, yeah, it was my birthday, 2015. I like just turned 31. He's like, Rochelle, get over to my house. Let's fix your resume. Let's make sure your samples are tight. Let's make sure everything's good. And so I was able to get a meeting on that, but they needed a Black woman. I actually ended up replacing Tracy Oliver, who had just left the show, and to go off and be the brilliant, wonderful screenwriter that she is. And so, yeah, they needed a Black woman. They needed, you know, it helped that I was from Atlanta, which is where the show takes place. And it helps that I love sports, you know, so like so I wouldn't say that's pigeonholed, but like they definitely needed to fill, you know, a spot, you know, and to keep the kind of the demographics right. And yeah, it's also too like it's so hard to get on those dream shows, you know, so I think you just kind of have to find your joy in the shows you're lucky enough to get staffed on, you know.
Was there any point that either of you got to where you wondered if this was the right way to go? Or, I mean, both of you seem to kind of, I don't want to say stumble into it, but you both seemed kind of naive, and you were, you know, like, this is what I want to do. I have no idea how many obstacles there are. I just know that this is what I want to do. So did that lead to any time going, what the hell am I doing? What?
Yes, all the time. Go ahead.
I say in the beginning, not for me, because I was trying to be an actress in New York. I thought that's what I wanted to do, taking acting classes, everything. And when I came to LA, I got a small part on Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Hated it. Hated every minute of it. Hated it. Fooling with my hair, makeup, hitting this spot and saying that. I hated the whole process. And after that, I was like, I'm done with that. And that's when I moved on to writing. So, and I never looked back after that.
I saw that on the IMDb page, and I was like, oh, I have to ask her about that. You were in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. What was your role? What was your role in that?
Well, it was the episode where Will has a friend visiting who's a stand-up comic, and Will says, oh, I could do stand-up comedy too. So they go to a comedy club, and I'm the MC. Yeah, I'm the MC at the comedy club, and Will gets up and bombs.
I remember that episode like beat for beat. That's awesome.
Okay. Rochelle, what about you then? Your second thoughts on stuff?
Yeah, because I was like, you know, I never believed in starving artists, so I always had a job. Like so even when there was a writer's strike when I first moved here, I worked as a PA on a talk show, and I started working in reality as a coordinator. I've done everything. I hustled my way into being a clearance coordinator just by knowing nothing about music clearance and how to even do all, you know, so there were just times where I'm just like, is this where I'm going to kind of be, is just in reality and reality TV. And then I kind of got my first break with my writing partner. We did Punch Up for a show called Love That Girl that was on TV1, and it was created by Bentley Kyle Evans, who was famous for creating the Jamie Foxx show and being a writer on Martin. and just being friends with these big comedians. So like he was getting back into TV. And so we did Punch Up on Love That Girl. And but just really under the table, it was just like, it was a great experience, but it was just like, we were kind of up against all like these legends and a lot of comics in the room. We were trying to keep up, but we were pulled to the side by one of the writers of Martin, Micah Jockway, who was fantastic and just kind of took us on as just like mentored us and kind of, just helped us like understand the room and the politics. And, that was the first time we'd heard Baby Writer, and, and that kind of thing. And just like, and so I really took to it. I liked all that, but my partner just was not into that vibe. She's, very much more solo and just so like, I think so. But yeah, there was like a time that was like, is this going to really pan out? Because it is so hard, even just to do Punch Up for someone. And then I just, after Love That Girl, I just kept getting hit up by all those writers that had did that room for, and just like, hey, can you come help me punch up this pilot? And I would just like go to people's houses for free and just like, oh, we'll be doing this thing for Nickelodeon or Disney Channel. I just kind of stayed in the room and just kind of like did a lot of free work. And they all remembered me. And then like Meg Deloach was like, remember you helped me punch up that pilot? Well, I got this show going on. And then by the time she got her show on, I was like, oh, I'm super busy now. I'm actually working, She's like, well, that's how it's supposed to be. That's how it's supposed to work out, like, so it is a lot of hustle. It is a lot of free work. But yeah, if you're young, it's totally worth it. Like I'm 36 now, so I'm not doing anything for free anymore. But like 10 years ago, I'll do whatever anyone needed.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a great attitude, and it's a realistic attitude, because people generally, and that's where they say Hollywood is small like that, where people remember and you help them out and they're going to do it. And speaking of small, so you had mentioned also that while you were at BU, you noticed that there weren't a lot of other African-American, even men, women, or whatever in your class. Did that that had no, that wasn't a deterrent for you at all? Were you surprised?
I think I was a little surprised. Also just like I came to Boston sight unseen. I'm from Atlanta. I got accepted. I went to the orientation in July, and that was the first time I'd ever been in Boston. And so that was a shock. And then I got to BU, and yeah, like I picked the wrong dorm. Like all the Black kids were at on West Campus. I was at Warren, and like maybe there were 4 other Black people in Warren Towers. But it was like, it was just kind of like, I knew this wasn't like the most popular major, but I would hope one day, I was like, well, if I'm doing it now, 2 years from now, it's going to be double and double. It's just going to keep increasing because it's about visibility. And, someone's got to kind of do it first. And there were Black kids in comm, but they were marketing, advertising, PR stuff, and for some reason, not film and TV. And so, yeah, Cherie Harris was the other Black girl in film and TV, and maybe a couple others. I'm trying to think of their names, but it was small. Yeah, it was really small.
Yeah, well, it's good that didn't deter you anyway.
And my professors were awesome. All my screenwriter professors, like it wasn't, it's just like, you're here to write, so let's learn how to write. There was never any kind of weirdness or someone telling me like, tell the story of your life, I could write whatever I wanted. Like I really felt like accepted in that regard.
Yeah. So as far as like in the business, so when you got on a staff and you're in your writer's room for the first time, so writer's rooms are notorious for all kinds of stuff years ago. Certainly, I think people feel like there's a shift. I know a lot of people I spoke with too, who don't want to just water it down. It's a creative atmosphere. But did you ever, again, being Black, being female, were you ever, Bernadette, did you ever encounter any issues? That's something that you might feel like might be good for someone to hear who's looking into going there?
I'd say more so as a beginner, a baby writer, I encountered more harshness, so to speak, sometimes because I didn't know the boundaries. I didn't know how the room worked, although they tried to teach us that in the Warner Brothers workshop.
Oh,
Just
really?
the experience of being there was a lot different. I remember once someone pitched something for a joke, and I thought that was funny. So I laughed and I went, "Oh, that's funny." And this other writer who was higher level, white man, had pitched something, and I didn't react to that because it didn't just hit my particular sense of humor. And so when I said, "Oh, that's funny," he goes, "Oh yeah, let's do that because Bernadette thinks it's funny."
Oh,
So yeah, so I kind of got a lot of stuff like that, which took me from being really enthusiastic to kind of shrinking, and feeling a little more timid about pitching things.
yeah.
I think since the Me Too movement, there's probably a lot less and hopefully no more physical teasing, teasing on, looks or, that kind of comment that can cross the line. But I did experience a lot of that earlier on from men and women, just comments about you, your physical demeanor, your physical attributes, things like that, that I don't think would be tolerated in a room today, and hopefully not.
Yeah. Rochelle, what was
Yeah,
your baby writer moments?
yeah. My biggest thing was getting cut off a lot, particularly like early on. And because on Survivor's Remorse, it was a lot of older guys, and it just became like a joke. And then like I kind of was able to like make fun of it, but like by season 2, because there would just be one older writer in particular that would always cut me off, like just mid-sentence. And so I just started doing a thing where I would just open my mouth and he would just start talking and like the room would crack up. Because I'm like, I haven't even said anything yet. Just like, oh, we're pitching on something. And then well, actually, just like, like, so I just, there is a lot of cutting women off. There is, this was the biggest one is, because early on, like I think I'm pretty funny, but I would pitch a lot of things under my breath, or I would like pitch it to the person next to me, kind of just like was a little scared to like put myself out there as much.
Yeah.
And then, but once I got burned enough times of having my jokes stolen and repitched as theirs, I was like, okay, I can't trust anyone. So I guess I just better say my shit like out loud. And so that was helpful. Yeah, but there's a lot of that kind of, because it is like for a lot of comedy rooms, it's like a scoreboard, like how many jokes can you get off? How many, can you beat that joke? And this is a real white guy thing, especially just trying like, they'll beat a joke so much and then like the joke is dead, like you stomped it. It's just now the whole bit is unfunny. Now it's cut from the script, like there's like, sometimes guys don't know when to say when on a joke, especially if a girl gets one off. This is early on, like it really is different now, but like early on, like, oh, that's great, it's in there. And then some guy's like, nah, I can beat that. It's like, well, now the joke's dead. So thanks.
Yeah, and I mean, it's funny because people don't realize how competitive comedy is. And you're right about if you get a joke in the script and then someone comes along and they're like, oh, what if we change this? And you're thinking, no, don't touch it. Yeah. Don't touch it. Leave it. It's a good joke. And then it's gone. You're like, oh. Did you have to do a lot of strategizing? Do you feel like when you were in the room? Because a lot of people ask this, and I try to remember when I was doing it. And I kind of went with the flow. I think you do, like you say, you learn who's going to cut you off or something, or when you feel confident enough to pitch. But did you actually like come home some nights and think, what am I doing? They're not hearing me. Because it's your job too.
Yeah.
I agree with Rochelle about getting cut off a lot. And I worked in a room where the writer's assistant, who was a male, would cut me off, and they would listen to him. And it's that whole woman thing of you pitching something, nobody hears it, they keep talking, and then somebody pitches what you just said, and you just, I said that, but they're just on their way. But it it does bring up something that should be of interest to you aspiring writers out there. There's a difference between writing and writing well and being in the room. Those are different qualities and talents. And I think taking improv, making sure your communication skills are sharp would help in the room. A lot of times you get those New York type powerful personalities that just will steamroll you. And you have to learn how to survive with that. You know, let them say their thing, usually supporting, like in improv, you learn to support somebody rather than fight them. You get more people on your side. Like even in pitching something, or if somebody pitches something and you don't think it's good, you don't slam it without having something else. You support it and say, hey, that made me think of this. You know, you just kind of like step on it and bring it to a new level, but also giving that person props, you know, or saying it. Yeah.
No, totally. I love, definitely don't be a thread puller. If you don't have a solution, don't pitch that something sucks. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And like, I totally agree, Bernadette. Like, because I took improv too, because I wanted to be a TV writer. But when I broke up with my writing partner, I kind of felt like, well, what's my personality? How do I think I'll be in the room, or how am I going to present myself? And, you know, because she was more the showman and I was like more the, like, you know, in the trenches like type like writer. And so I was like, well, I gotta, like, you know, be able to come out of my shell. And like improv, I took classes at UCB, and it totally just helped me feel more comfortable with being off the cuff, like just kind of like just being yourself, you know, because the room is a different animal. And you have to be liked, you know, and but you do have to kind of have you have to find who you are. Like, I know that I'm the person that knows every single Simpsons quote, and I've watched everything that's on TV, and I kind of have a dark sense of humor, you know, like that. Like when you in your interview, you kind of want to, when you do have a showrunner interview, and that's what will give you a TV job, it's like you want to get snippets of that into your interview so they kind of know what they're getting, you know, because I've seen cases where friends have been great in an interview and got the job, and then were totally opposite in a room, or didn't know how to handle the room and froze up. And, you know, so there's all kinds of things you have to do to prepare yourself for that first showrunner interview. And then if you get staff, like that first job, and the WJ does provide a little boot camp for that too. I didn't have boot camp because I was on a cable show for my first staff job. So they did the boot camp in June, but I started the show in October. But yeah, just seconding what Bernadette said of like just finding your lane and finding what makes you an asset.
Yeah. So you both talked about like how you got there, and both of you mentioned somebody helping you out, somebody reaching out. So Bernadette, you were going to tell this story about Karen.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
First of all, I wanted to say to Rochelle, Michael Ajakaway was such a sweetheart, and it's so cool to hear that story that he helped you. There's a lot of really great people out there, and it's finding somebody who can help you, who is connected themselves, can be a great help in boosting your career. I worked on Girlfriends, and it was a multi-camera show. That means it was shot, you know, on a stage with an audience. And there was a girl in the audience, and she goes, oh, can I talk to you for a second? And I said, yeah, sure. She goes, oh, I want to be a writer, and I've written something. Can we exchange numbers and you read my stuff? And I said, sure. So we exchanged numbers. She sent me her script. It was great. I gave her some notes. She sent it back. She improved on the notes, did a really great job. So I showed it to the showrunner, Mara Brockakil, and they set up an interview with her. And I sent her a 10-page email of do's and don'ts for the interview. Like, Mara's really into shoes, so I said, wear cute shoes. And just little tips here and there of things I knew about what they were looking for. And she got the job. And this girl, her name is Karen Gist. Karen Gist worked for the remainder of the Girlfriends, and then went on to working hour drama. Then she ran, I forget the couple of CW shows. I forget the names of them.
I know she did Star. Yeah, she did Star and Fox.
And she was on, what's that? Anyway, she's done a lot of work, and then she was running Mixed Dish. And now she's got to deal with 20th. So it feels great that I helped her. She even quotes me, and mentions me in interviews as being her godmother. So sweet, yeah. But that was an easy thing to do, and that was something where someone took a chance. Let me just ask a writer and see if they'll help.
Yeah.
Maybe some writers would have said no, but I said yes. So
I think a lot of people, because they asked that, some people would never have the nerve to ask the writer at a shooting, like, hey, can you read my stuff? And didn't it flash in your head like, oh gosh, what are you, psycho? What are you doing? Why are you asking me? What,
no.
I mean, it's so nice of you, because that is the way. I mean, you just gotta get I say somebody's got to do you a favor at some point. Somebody's got to reach out and help you out. And it's nice that you can turn around and return that favor to somebody as well, and have somebody go on to have a nice career too, not just maybe we should we look at some of these questions, because some of them I think we answered. How did you make connections within the industry, especially specifically within the Black female community? Did you seek out other Black writers or performers at any point? Did you feel like that might be more helpful or would make sense?
I did seek out people, but I ended up not finding like a lot of Black females. I did found Christina Anthony, and then full circle moment, she ends up being cast on Mixed Dish when I got staffed on Mixed Dish. I'm like, look at us, and she did Second City. And so yeah, you try to you just end up kind of knowing, even if you don't know each other, you end up knowing each other's names, because it's like the still small group trying to make it, so you know of each other. And but I think mainly it was just trying to just get my foot in the door any way that I could, and knowing what I could work. But that brings me back to like, when you think you're going to give up, just like, I feel like I'd run out of, paths to follow. And then Bill came in and I was just babysitting for him and said, oh, here's your chance, so you kind of never know where it's going to come from. And I think when it does come to networking and making connections, to be as genuine as you can and find other genuine people, and not just because I'll get hit up in my Instagram DMs, I'll get hit up on Twitter. And even in that kind of exchange, I can kind of tell like who really is like genuine, or who is just like put the same message in 400 writers inboxes, because I'll do that too. Like back when Earth was open, I would meet up and get coffee with the writer. Also before I had a baby, I would do that. So now, but I still like Zoom with writers, so I got a little time on Sunday, we could chat, I'll answer emails. I try to read, scripts, just to kind of like, pay it forward.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, I think it's great to network with other Black females, especially for a friendship and a relating to each other in a way that other people can't. But don't just limit yourself to Black females. I mean, there's a lot of people out there. Get schmoozy, talk with the Harvard boys, talk with those other people, get to know everybody, be somebody that everybody likes, in the sense of, you can talk, you can relate to everybody. Because the thing that was frustrating for me, like I said earlier, I think, is when I first got into the business, and I'm way earlier than Rochelle. My first show was 1993, Living Single. So it was pretty much, welcome to the world of screen, TV writing. Your shows are on the right. And I felt like, well, what if I like that show over there? So I didn't want to be limited by just, a particular type of show because of my skin color. I wanted to go with where my sense of humor was, where I thought my abilities would help, and so don't limit yourself, of course, be comfortable with the group you're comfortable with, but, try to broaden that a little bit to, knowing the frat boys too.
Did performing stand up, that must have helped as far as knowing people in LA?
Yeah, yes, some people, but not that much because I knew, Jerry Seinfeld very well. I knew Larry David very well. I knew Paul Reiser. I knew a lot of those people, but I did not work on their shows. So,
Yeah,
you
can
know,
only go so far.
yeah, it only goes so far. Sometimes it's good to know people, and sometimes maybe based on, your beginning comedy days,
Yeah.
maybe that's the impression they held of you back then. But yeah, I think just put yourself out there. And there's a lot of ways to do that. I mean, doing stand-up is a great way to get seen. Doing improv, being in an improv group, going someplace like,
Yeah, you both said you
or whatever. Yeah,
both did improv, which is nice.
yeah.
I'm not an improv person. I just
Mhm.
I have to have a joke. I can't be on stage and not go for a joke. So
Well,
I was
see, you
never
find
good
the
at
joke naturally, though. From
it.
learning
Yeah,
improv, you learn to find that within yourself. See, and that makes you good in a room, and that makes you good,
yeah.
in an interview.
I was,
Another thing is, Rochelle was talking about interviews. I remember having an interview with the guy who had Just Shoot Me, and I was so excited because I read the script. It sounded great, and I went in there and I was so serious. He would ask me questions. He said like, well, some writers have bad habits or whatever. What is something that you do that or what is something that you think you could improve on, And me, like an idiot, just said, oh, well, I write scripts really fast, so I could probably slow down. Why didn't I just say something stupid like, I eat too much chocolate, or,
Yeah.
It's like, remember to be light in these interviews. And I was taking it so seriously that I didn't get light about it. And I didn't get the job either.
yeah. Because they're really looking for, at that point, they want to know what kind of person you are as well, right? I mean, because you're going to go in a room and are they funny? Are they nice? Can we work with them?
Yeah, yeah. Or whatever other reasons they have in their head. You can't figure it out, but at least you feel better when you walk out.
Yeah.
If you've been true to yourself, rather than pretending.
And if you wear good shoes, that's always.
Yeah. Some people care.
So there's a couple of questions here, and I hear these a lot. So, and I don't know, it's probably just an opinion from both of you guys. They say, thanks for being here. What should you have in your arsenal in order to get representation? Is a spec, or should it be an original pilot? Have you had experience with this? You guys both started with specs. A lot of people want to see pilots. What do you see now as being the trend?
Well, I'm finding a lot of people now are writing pilots, but there are programs that still want specs, like the Warner Brother Workshop. They want spec scripts. A lot of showrunners I've heard of who will not read specs and just want to read pilots. If you're going to write a pilot, make sure it's in your voice, maybe even taking some of your own life experience or something so that you really feel who you are in that script. But I say it's best to have both, to have a spec and have a pilot. And then when you finish writing those, write more. I think I wrote 10 spec scripts before during the first 5 years of my career, I wrote about 10. I wrote everything. Yeah. So just keep writing.
Yeah, I co-signed that. But yeah, the trend is pilots, and also particularly for reps and for showrunners. And also too, because there are a lot of people that are selling their pilots, early before they've even staffed. Like I know I have a friend who has sold 3 pilots and hasn't staffed yet. And yeah, it's it's interesting because it's just there's this, people are craving like original content because there is so much space to fill. There's so many streaming platforms, there's so many channels. So whatever unique life experience you have, or at least adjacent to, write that. Because they just want new fun stuff on TV. And just, the specs are for programs, but also too, you really want to make those specs your own. Like, because they know, like, they don't just need to see a carbon copy of that show. They need to see what you would like infuse into it, what your style is. Yeah.
Mhm. Here's another really interesting question. Do you face pressures to write in a way that may not present characters of color in the most favorable light? I.e., like to put them more into stereotypical situations. Have you had that, and have you dealt with that?
Yeah, I haven't faced that. Yeah, the shows I've been on with Black characters are, I mean, other than like Mixed, which is a sitcom, so everyone's a stereotype, but not like in a, like, I think this person's asking like, just like negative,
Negative, yeah.
version. Yeah. So like, no, I've never been put in that position. And also like I'm from the suburbs. I don't even know that life anyway. So I would never even try to write that on my own because it would be the worst. So yeah, I think there are changes like, especially like I have some friends that work in like procedurals and dramas, and for the most part across the board, people are trying to not write in that way. Like I'm thinking of like Hollywood Shuffle and like Robert Townsend and
Oh, yeah.
Black Thug #1, this and that, so that kind of is changing, especially as Black people are allowed to tell their own stories, so if there is a gang related or something negative kind of thing, it's usually a Black person is behind it. They have that authentic experience versus some network saying we want to do a show about this, and the writer being forced to write against their own morals and character. So yeah, I don't really
Yeah.
experience that.
This is a,
Could I add
go ahead.
something?
Sure.
I've worked as a reader for HBO for the past 5 years, and one of the things that I notice is that a lot of times, if someone's going to take a ethnic experience, at least try to put a new spin on it. It's like we've seen the drive-by shooting, gang stuff, but how can you make it different? If that's your reality and that's the world you grew up in, want to write about, try to think of a unique way of putting it across.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So here's another very interesting thing. We kind of touched on it. Being in the writer's room, did you ever feel like you represented the voice of the Black person? Like, would they, and I remember, I know there's been stuff in Blackish, kind of when they're in his office at a conference table, and they'll be like, well, Dre, you're Black, what do you think? Did you ever have that experience? And if so, how did that feel?
Yes, every job I I am
Yeah.
like is but that's not always a bad thing, because you want the character to resemble reality. Like Survivor's Remorse, we had 3 Black female lead characters, and they're all very different, but I was still supposed to be able to speak to all 3 of them. I'm just like, I'm nothing like Cassie, like she's loud and this and that, and I'm nothing like Imcha, I'm actually kind of more like this, but you still kind of have to be able to at least absorb all the types of Black women you might know. And luckily with animated, Tiffany Haddish voiced one of the characters, so I did just kind of end up making that bird blacker because I knew it was Tiffany Haddish. So that was a lot of fun to just kind of pretend to be Tiffany for like a couple for the run of that. And yeah, you kind of, I mean, you have to be your authentic voice, but you do need to you're in the room for a reason, and like, but then I was also on Tacoma FD, and a very quirky show from the guys who did Super Troopers, and there were no Black female characters. So I just got to like do silly ass jokes, and that was fun too. It's kind of like a break from Blackness for a little bit. It was just like, okay, we're just dealing with these firefighters and what they get into. So you really just kind of have to go off the show and what they need, but you can't like abstain from jumping in on a character that looks like you. It was what I'd say.
Bernadette, did you ever experience like someone saying, if they're coming up with some line and they turn to you and would say, well, you're Black, what do you think? Like that kind of represent everyone all of a sudden?
I've heard of those experiences happening, not to me though, because most of the shows that I've worked on have had a lot of Black writers and Black showrunners, so they would never say anything like that,
Yeah.
or limit your experience to just being that. it's funny because when you think of like a lot of the early sitcoms, like the Jeffersons and stuff like that, those were all white guys, all white Jewish guys writing those, and no one ever thought, well, why don't we get Black writers in here, So the thought that myself or Rochelle couldn't write on a show that had all white characters is absurd, because it doesn't have to just have a Black character for us to understand human dialogue dynamics. We're writers, we listen all the time. We're in a restaurant listening, well, we used to be in restaurants, but we were in restaurants listening to the people talking next to us. So we pick up, we're like sponges, we pick up everything. So we could write all kinds of characters. So to be limited just because of your skin color is absurd.
I agree. And just to quickly piggyback off that, and hopefully this won't be too much of a hot take, but I think Black writers are qualified to write pretty much any character, because we also consume media. We grew up with TV that didn't see us represented as much, and we kind of that's how I learned the craft of TV writing, from watching Seinfeld, from watching Martin, from watching all these shows with different points of view, and also still having my authentic Black experience, and you could even argue on the other side, like I think it is harder for white writers to try to put themselves in the situation of a Black character, and that's why they shows like, oh, I think we need a Black writer. So just since this is Black History Month and it's a diversity panel, I'm just like, Black writers are super qualified to do it all. So you don't have to pigeonhole us. Because I've read some great specs of all white shows written by Black writers, and just like you wouldn't tell the difference.
Yeah. Okay, some other interesting questions. One kind of a fun one is, can you recall a joke that you got into a show or pitch that said, "This is why I'm writing comedy"? I know there's probably thousands of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or anything, like I said, that didn't get in, that you were brokenhearted over.
Well, I'll say that usually when you write a draft, writing is a collective process, the whole staff, you break the idea together, you go off and do the outline, you come back, you get notes on the outline, you go off and do a script, you come back, and that script is tabled. It's like, hey, let's give Bernadette a hand. Okay, page 1,
Yeah.
So I think I would be happiest when some of my jokes remained in a script. And it's not so much that your jokes are bad, it's a new moment in time, and you have a bunch of creative people and they're all bouncing off each other, so you come up with jokes that make everybody laugh at the moment, so that goes in instead of the one that you thought of it at the time.
Yeah.
So I'd say more so than any one joke, it's like a script that a good percentage of my stuff remained would be the most memorable for me.
Yeah, it was always like, I wrote that script. Well, actually, I wrote that line is still in there. But the idea was mine, but all the good jokes were long gone. What about you, Rochelle?
It is always great when your stuff stays in. I was trying to think of a bit though, like a bit I was just super proud of when I was on Tuca and Birdie. That's another thing too, like you'll write stuff that'll be in someone else's episode. And so it's like, it's really hard to claim anything. But I was just really into Downton Abbey, and I pitched this bird version of Downton Abbey called The Nests of Netherfield, and just like it just like got a huge laugh, and just like they did. So just by me saying a fake Downton Abbey, like I watched these animators create this whole universe, this whole like fake bird, like I just thought that was so cool that I could just say a dumb pun or whatever, and like they have to animate this now. Like they have to like spend hours and draw these birds in like period clothing. And I was like, that is just really cool. Cause like they have to listen to us. That's the thing too. Like they have to do what we say. And the actors have, it's a very interesting world. And also too, I wanted to pull up some of like my first drafts before the start, but I didn't get a chance. But it's like, cause every room is different. Survivor's Remorse wasn't like hard jokes all the time, and then Mixage was very much hard jokes. And that is a lot of fun because it just goes through the process of like just to see the springboard it creates, and it's like, okay, that's a funny line, and then someone pitches on it like, oh well, that's the way to go. But yeah, I'm just like, I guess between me and Bernadette, we probably like written thousands of jokes in these scripts, and like,
Gotcha.
and they run together. But I'm gonna try and find one example before we end today. I'm gonna see if I can do it.
So
I'd just like to add quickly,
Sure.
me coming from the world of stand-up, and giving that up to write for TV, I didn't miss it at all. I never considered myself much of a performer as a stand-up anyway, but I was a writer as a stand-up. I loved what I wrote. So being a writer for TV and having Queen Latifah say that rather than me saying it was a bonus.
yeah. What about the opposite? There was a question kind of like that in here, that you knew that someone would butcher the joke. It would be like, oh no.
Yeah, actors.
Yeah.
I mean, I worked on a show that we had some really wonderful actors, but some of them weren't as adept comedically as others. So we'd have a great joke and they'd slaughter it. And then we'd coach them and they'd slaughter it again. And we'd have to come up with another joke. So it was like mock funeral for the joke that we all loved in the room, but the actor couldn't deliver.
I found that was true more times in table readings, because they're not that familiar with it yet anyway. So they get to that and you're waiting and they do it and it just bombs. And you're like, oh, no, you should have said it like this.
But then you have the actors, actors who are so good that they can make stuff that wasn't funny. John Cryer worked on a show called Partners that I was on, and John can make anything funny. So it was a delight working for him.
Yeah, totally. Like also kids, when on mixed we have like 3 kids to write for, and it's tough. you know the character, you're like, oh, this is funny. It gets a laugh when the room reads it around the table, and then you take it to the table read, and that kid just doesn't have it together that day. And it's just like, oh, yeah.
Rochelle, you talked about you ran into someone at the coffee shop and you saw them and you approached them. So somebody asking, I mean, obviously networking is important, and being brave enough, you don't have to be so bold, but brave enough to approach someone like the woman just who approached you, Bernadette, and just ask a favor. You say no, you say no. So someone asks, do you have any advice how you do this during a pandemic? Is there any way to network during these times, especially if someone's getting ready to hopefully go out to LA?
I'd say right now is a great opportunity to network, because there's so many people doing Zoom workshops. Find somebody who's, there's like a lot of platforms on Facebook as well, where you can go on, and there's LA Writers. There's a lot of different ones where they're advertising workshops all the time. And these are workshops taught by working professionals. I love taking classes. I've always taken classes. Every hiatus, I was taking directing, editing. I was taking some kind of class. But I took one recently with a guy named Brent Forrester, who is on Space Force right now. And he did a really great class. And the thing is, you make that connection with Brent Forrester. You take a class with somebody else, you make that connection with them. I mean, I figured that, or go to a panel, and after the panel's over, look up those people's email addresses and thank them, because people rarely get thanked in this business. So write them a note and just say, hey, I just saw your panel. Thanks so much. And, just establish a connection and then keep those connections going. I'll say one thing that when I was back in the modeling days, when I took this improv class, the guy who taught it was a TV commercial director. And he said, rarely do people get thanked. So always write thank you notes. And I kept that up. I would read the trades, and they used to have like a little column where they'd say who got promoted, who got married, who had a baby. I would send them cards, everything. That stuff paid off. This is a weird story, but when I was married, my husband and I were sitting doing this meditation, okay? And I thought of this guy, Steve Stark, who was an exec I had met earlier. Hadn't talked to him for years, but he came up in my meditation. I pushed that aside. He came up again in the meditation. We finished the meditation, the phone rang. It was Steve Stark asking me if I had a sample, to give him. And I did. I gave him the sample, and that's how I got my job on Girlfriends. So,
oh my gosh.
Some meditation.
So, meditation, yeah. So
meditate yourself a job.
If you, this might be kind of tough because you've both already given great pieces of advice. Is there something that you wish you had known before going into all this? Or I get the sense that you kind of both enjoyed this, like just walking in and going, oh my God, this is what I want to do. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I'll try this door, this door, this door. But what, is there any advice that you would want to give to, you could be specific with women, people of color, anybody in general going forward? Their dream is to be on, is to have your jobs, to be on the staff. What's the best advice that you've gotten that you could pass along?
I would say think outside the box a little bit. I think I don't have any regrets, but I do feel like I followed a very traditional route into TV writing, and just knowing that like you write your spec, you get your, just trying to like, break it down in a mathematic way of like how to make it as a TV writer. And around that same time, there were so many people, particularly women of color, forging their own path. Like I did a web series, but I'm like, I don't have time for this. I just want to be on staff, like, and I was kind of have more of like that version of it versus like looking at how Issa Rae turned her web series into like this beautiful, wonderful project for HBO, and like just having like something, if you something you really believe in, to really follow that, and don't stress so much about the order of things or just how that goes. Like if just kind of follow your heart in terms of what you want to create.
Okay, great advice. Bernadette, any final thoughts on this? Any going forward?
Yeah, I'd say be drama free. I mean, even if you get a job, leave your problems at the door, go in there, because it's about the showrunner's problems. It's about their vision, not your vision of the show. Another thing is, as far as career goes, know what you want, know where you'd like to go, but don't try to control it. And I'll say from my own personal experience, I knew the kind of shows I wanted to work on, but I get other offers like, here, work on this show. And I'm like, no, I don't want to be on that. I don't like that kind of show. I want to be over here. So I tried to control it a little bit too much, but you never know. You don't have all the information, the directions. Don't try to drive the car. Maybe by working on that little show I didn't want to be on, I could have worked with somebody who could have taken me to the next step or the next level or the type of show that I wanted to be on. So when an opportunity comes along, say yes, because it's coming there for a reason.
Yeah, and what I always heard too was bad shows don't always equal bad writers. It's like, you're like, I don't want to be on that show, but you go there and it's actually a bunch of good people, and it's one person making bad decisions.
Right.
All right.
A paycheck.
Yeah.
Thank you. We have to wrap up. So I want to just plug. I know this is so great. The next Com Talk is sports and the work of anti-racism on February 24th. So we hope to have you all on that one. You're seeing that. That's from also 3 to 4. That's a week from today, next Wednesday. So Rochelle and Bernadette, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. This has been great. Maybe
Thank you guys.
Maybe we'll do it again.
Thank you, Bernadette, for being a trailblazer. Like, thank you.
Absolutely.
You.
I love the image of the books on your head. I didn't know that they actually did that. Harder to read them that way, but hey, thank you so much.
Thanks, Bill.
All right.
Great talking to y'all. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.